went down the center of Eretz Yisrael, then it turned to the Mediterranean Sea, went through Gaza, and from there to Egypt. But that's not how the Ribono Shel Olam took the Jewish people through Sinai. He took them through the center of Sinai. There are a number of passes in the mountains in the desert. We're more familiar with it, unfortunately, because of the wars that have occurred over the last 70 years. So the Jewish army knows pretty much the Sinai Desert and how to go through it. So they march through the center and they come up. The Gemara, the Torah says rather, to Eilat v'Etzion Gover, to Eilat and Etzion Gover. Now, today we have a city called Eilat, which is on the Gulf of Eilat, the Gulf of Aqaba, which is the passage to the Red Sea, to the Indian Ocean. Whether that's the Eilat that's mentioned in the Chumash or not, so we don't know. What we do know is that Shlomo HaMelech built a port in later times. I mean, it's much later times, 500-600 years later. He built a port in Eilat, which is pretty close to where our port of Eilat is today. Whether that's the Eilat of the Chumash is a matter of conjecture. But anyway, they come up that way, and they cross into what is today the country of Jordan, Ever Ayarde. So they are on the east side of the Dead Sea and the east side of the Jordan River. So they're not in Eretz Yisrael proper. They're in Ever Ayarden. They're in the Transjordan. Now there we have nations. We have, first of all, we have Edom. So it's not clear where Edom lived. Many say that Edom lived in the Negev of Eretz Yisrael. And others say that Edom lived in what is today northern Saudi Arabia, but they are adjacent to each other. So Edom, Har Seir, that's where the descendants of Esav existed. And we'll see the Jewish people want that Edom should give them free passage through the country. They're willing to pay for it. But Edom refuses. Esav refuses because Esav remains Esav to the end, even when it's to his benefit. And the Jewish people choose on the basis of what Moshe hears from heaven, so to speak, not to bother Edom, not to force the issue. It's interesting, the Torah always considers Esav to be our brother. Achicha, he's your brother. Now, we all have members of the family that are not necessarily people we would choose to have as members of the family. And nevertheless, they're members of the family. And Esav is seen that way. Now, in Tanakh, the Novi Ovadia, who was a ger, descended from Edom, has the prophecy against Esav. We read it as the Haftorah in Vayishlach. And he points out that Esav will come to a defeat at the hands of his brother Yaakov. Volu Moshe and Bahar Tzion, Ishpodes Har Esav. So it's like there are only two mountains left in the world, the mountain of Esav and the mountain of Zion, and the Jewish people will prevail. Now, what is Esav today? What is Edom today? So the Gemara says, Bo Sancheriv uvilbelas ha'olam. Sancheriv came, and the king of Ashur, and he drove everybody out of their countries. That was his policy, because if he drove you out of the country, then you were less likely to rebel against his rule. And everybody intermingled. Everybody became mixed up together, so that there's no clear identity anymore as to any of these nations. In Jewish tradition, Rome became Edom. Rome became Esav. But whether the Romans from their ethnic stock are the same people as from Esav, we don't know that. But in essence, in thought, we consider them to be Edom. So the Jewish people didn't start up with Edom. So they had to circumvent Edom, meaning they had to go farther east and then turn north. So now they are deeper into Ever HaYarden. Now, Ever HaYarden has the same topography as Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael has got this great African Indian rift that goes down the country. That's where the Dead Sea is. It's where the Sea of Galilee is. It's where the Yarden is. And if you can see it clearly on any space photographs from NASA. It's like split. And geologists say originally there must have been a tremendous earthquake that split the two. So the eastern part of the Jordan Valley, of the Jordan Rift, is got the same topography as the western part, except it has higher mountains. And just west of the mountains are plains, fertile plains, and are large areas of open land. So in that part of Jordan, there were, in the time of Moshe, there were the countries of Moab and of Bnei Ammon. And Moab and Bnei Ammon were descendants of Lot, also our relatives. The whole story of the Jewish people in this area of the world is relatives. And maybe that's why it's so hard to come to any sort of conclusion here, because we all know there's no fight like a family fight. That's completely irrational. So Moab, they were not allowed to start out with Moab, because again, Al-Totsaris Moab, he's your relative, he's Lot. Lot was the nephew of Avraham, and the Jewish people, because of Avraham, owe him a debt, because when they went to Egypt, he did not reveal to Paro that Sarah was really Avraham's wife. He could have sold him out. He could have gotten gain for himself, but he did not do so. So therefore, the Torah counts that to his credit. So it's interesting, not doing a bad thing also counts. When a person has the capacity to do something wrong or harmful, and he restrains himself from so doing, especially when he has an opportunity to have gain from it, so that counts to his merit. So, so even though Moab, as we'll see in next week's parsha, is not really a friend to the Jewish people, Balak hires Bilam to curse the Jewish people, but nevertheless, Jewish people were not allowed to infringe upon the sovereignty of Moab or to take any of his territory away. So if you continue north, so you bypassed Edom, and now you bypassed Moab, so then you come to the territory of Bnei Ammon. Now there's a remembrance of that even today, because the main city still called Ammon, still called Amman, Rabat Ammon. And the Arabs kept the name. And that's also relatives, descendants of Lot. So they couldn't start with them either. So how are you going to get across the Jordan? Now here, Ammon and Moab make a fateful error. As we see in next week's parsha, that Moab is nervous about the Jewish people. So when the attempt to curse them fails with Bilam, so the Gemara says, Ammon and Moab tiaru b'Sichon. They made an alliance with Sichon. Now Sichon is the king of the Amori, which is one of the 7 nations that populated this part of the country. And the Amori were a very strong and warlike tribe. And Sichon was a great warrior. So Ammon and Moab figured that they'll have an alliance with Sichon. So to speak, they'll place themselves under the protection of Sichon. And once they're placed under the protection of Sichon, the Jewish people won't be able to make any inroads upon their territory. They'll be safe, etc. And since Sichon had this great reputation for never losing a battle, he was the champion. So therefore they felt very safe in so doing. And that's what the Gemara means, Ammon and Moab tiaru b'Sichon. Once they made the alliance with Sichon, tiaru, it became tohor. It became permissible that the Jewish people could take Ammon and Moab. Because Ammon and Moab were no longer Ammon and Moab. As long as they relied upon the fact that they were descended from Lot, and as long as they relied upon the fact that the Jewish people therefore would not do anything to them because of their relationship to Avram Avinu, so they were safe. Al totzar es Moab, al tizkor milchama. The Torah didn't allow it. But once they no longer relied upon that, but they took proactive steps against the Jewish people, and they allied themselves with Sichon, so then, so to speak, their territory becomes fair game. Not only that, Sichon comes to make war against the Jewish people. He brings his entire army to stop the Jews from proceeding further up the Jordan Valley to try to get there to Israel. He comes to make war upon them, and there he is defeated. In his defeat, then the Jewish people are able to occupy not only the lands of the Amori, where Sichon was the king, but they're also allowed to annex the territories of Ammon and Moab, and to be able to cross from that direction. Now what will happen is that, as we will read later in Matos, that the Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain will become infatuated with the lands of the Amori and of Ammon and Moab, and later of Og Melech HaBoshan. And because of that, they won't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. They'll say, this is good enough for us. Nice pasture land, this is good enough for us. But at the outset here, when we first meet Sichon, that's not the case, but we see rather a war, and this is the first of the wars of the conquest of Eretz Yisrael by the Jewish people, wars which will culminate with Yoshua and the Shoftim, and finally Shaul and David, that finally conquer all of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Rotz HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zaka